Welcome back to Morning Joy, where truth matters. I'm your host, Keith Downey. And how do we find the balance for our spiritual life and not falling into devotional fatigue? Here to talk about it is Debbie Giorgianni and Adam Blai. Good morning, Debbie and Adam.
Thank you so much, Keith. This is the Friday edition of The Next Right Thing, so we just want to remind our listeners of Morning Joy to tune in tomorrow for the Spirit World, 10 a.m. Central, 11 a.m. Eastern, where we're going to be talking about how fear is not of God. So it's very, very important during these times, Adam, that we dedicate a whole show to that tomorrow, because a lot of people feel overwhelmed and they're just entertaining a lot of fear in their lives, worrying about the future, and that is not good. So that's tomorrow on the Spirit World. But today, guess what? We're talking about balance in the spiritual life. So Adam, why don't you begin?
Sure, Deb. So this is something I've seen play out over the years in a number of ways. Play out, and what I mean by that is when there's imbalance, and it can cause problems. So here's a few things to think about that could be helpful. First off, when our need to have a balance between our regular secular lives and our spiritual life. When we're living in the world, we need obviously to take care of our responsibilities, get the bills paid, go to work, go to school, whatever it is your task in life is. And a lot of people I've seen over the years will say, I've gotten so busy, I no longer go to Mass, I no longer pray the rosary, I don't have any of those devotions anymore because just life got in the way, is the thing people often say. And I think the Bible is so clear that the spiritual life needs to be interwoven with the secular life, where, the old idea of praying, throughout the day, as the divine office that the priests say and the religious say, that the day is punctuated by prayer. We've talked about ora et labora before, the motto of the Benedictine order that St. Benedict wrote, which is, of course, pray and work. So there needs to be a balance between those two, not allowing the secular to completely dominate and say, well, I'm too busy, I've got kids, I've got bills to pay, I don't go to church anymore. And then you can actually get out of balance the other way, Deb. Some people take on too much to where their regular life falls apart. And we need to basically remember that we have a responsibility to care for ourselves, provide enough so that we're caring for ourselves, and hopefully we have the ability to do a little bit for others. But I bet in life coaching you've seen cases where the balance got out of whack. Have you?
Oh, absolutely. That's what we stress the most in coaching, is this idea of really pacing oneself and to keep it all in balance, because that's how you're going to get the mind, body, spirit way of conducting life, which brings the most joy, if you will. And it's important to do that and to work at that and then to branch it even wider to all the circles around an individual that has influence, like their friends, their coworkers, their things they do at the church, the things they do for their neighbors, things like that. So you branch it out, even how they manage their finances. So you tend to always lean towards a very healthy balance, because that's going to keep the wheel running smoothly.
Mm-hmm. And it's going to allow for both to be there.
Exactly.
You need the regular life to give you the free time to do the spiritual work. And the spiritual work makes regular life not tolerable, that's the wrong word, but basically gives us the perseverance when life gets bumpy.
Right.
Okay.
Well, before you go on, let me just share something, because you just sparked something in me that reminded me of when a pastor that I worked for shared this story, that he was working with a lady at the church who was constantly volunteering at the church. And I mean constantly. She was there at 7:30 in the morning. She didn't leave till like 5:30, 6 o'clock at night. She was always there. And apparently her home life was really rocky. She was having a difficult time with her husband. There was problems with the kids. There was just she just felt more at peace at the church. And everybody can understand that. Of course, you're in the house of God. Of course you feel that peace. But I remember when he told us that he finally sat down with her and he said, you need to go home and figure out these problems at home. You just can't be living at the church. It's not healthy because you're not really engaging in the world. And it was true. And so she had to face those things, those difficult things at home that she had to work through. And she ended up doing it beautifully. But it wasn't until Father had sat down with her and said, enough already, please stop volunteering.
Yeah. We can't treat God or the church or the spiritual life as kind of an escape in order to kind of put our head in the sand and ignore problems. That's not healthy. And yes, there's healing with God, of course, and we always pray. We always turn to God for assistance, but not to avoid, the issues going on. Okay, secondly, within the spiritual life, let's assume that we have some balance and we have a spiritual life going, right? We're covering the basics. We're making it to Mass when we're supposed to. We're getting to confession when we need to. We're maybe saying a little bit of prayers outside of Mass. Well, within the spiritual life, we have the regular obligations that we just mentioned, some of them. But then we can get out of balance by either not taking on any personal devotions that resonate for us, like, say, a particular title of Mary, or maybe it's the Rosary, or maybe it's a particular saint, and studying their life and doing some reading. Maybe we have absolutely nothing for our specific journey and our specific spiritual growth, for that spiritual food. Or, and here's one I know you've seen, Deb, we have too much. The person who takes on 12 or 15 different devotions within a month, they can't even remember all the things that they're doing, and it doesn't allow the depth to develop. One of the rules of thumb I've heard from people that have done spiritual direction is you want to pick something and stay with it and go deep enough with it to start really benefiting from it and reflecting on it and seeing it play out versus saying, I'm going to take on 20 things at once.
That's exactly right. Spot on. And when I was a spiritual director for many years, that's exactly what we would encourage the folks to have a devotion challenge you, to let it, to prompt you to go deeper. So you end up evolving and expanding and being more enlightened and deeper. And there's all these wonderful things that come, all these fruits that come from diving into devotions. But if you're just checking the boxes and you're going through the devotions going, okay, I got to do the next novena because this is coming up and it's on the calendar and everybody's doing it, so I'm going to jump in and see what happens. That's not necessarily going to transform you from the inside out. That's something you're doing rather than something that is actually working within you.
Yeah, and it makes me think of the difference between saying a lot of prayers without any real heart to them, without really engaging in them, and kind of just saying the words quickly, versus saying one prayer extremely slowly and meditating on all of the words.
Yeah. So, Adam, I have to say this because I'm going to forget because I'm getting older by the second. So, your words were in my mind. In my brain the other day when I was in the midst of something and I was going through a series of prayers, and I felt myself going into that almost autopilot, status there. And then your words just came right through, and it was like, just say it from the heart, say it slowly, say it with that intention. And I slowed down and I thought of every word and put myself in that place. And I'm very visual, so I imagined, what it looked like, everything. Adam, it was unbelievable. That one prayer did so much more for me than the 30 prayers that I was rattling through.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful.
So I want to thank you.
Well, it's not me. I pick these things up from good priests that I've known down through the years. Yeah, and all of it's God's information. It's all wonderful. So, again, we want to have a balance within our spiritual life. You have to have those regular obligations in place before you're adding other things to them. It doesn't make sense to not meet your obligations, because if you're missing Mass, you're putting yourself in a state of mortal sin. It doesn't make sense to then do a bunch of devotions and basically you're out of balance. Things are out of order or they're disordered. So we want to have that foundation. We must have that foundation, and then we build upon that, but let's build upon it slowly and methodically. Okay, and the next theme or story that I've seen play out a number of times. What about the person who thinks they're called to some extraordinary work? I get these emails about once a week, Deb. Somebody feels in prayer that, they're supposed to drop everything and form a religious order. Or I get a lot of people that say, I want to be like you. I want to, not that I'm anything special, but people, they see you in the public and they say, I want to be like you. I want to study these things and help the church and, train priests and be an expert in this stuff. And they're willing to change their life. They think there's a degree they can go pursue. They get excited.
Well, how about this? How about the folks that contact us that say, I've raised my family. I'm pretty much done now. I want to just leave and go and join and do missionary work or join a convent or a monastery or something like that. We get those too.
Yeah, and usually that's not an option because most religious orders I'm aware of, they have limits on the age that you can enter. So they will make exceptions if they feel in prayer that God wants that. But generally, you have to be pretty young in order to enter a religious order, for a number of reasons. But yeah, that's often not an option in terms of going into a formal religious order. That's a vocation. Mm-hmm. And generally, that's something God's going to call you to earlier in life.
Right. And let's not to keep our Morning Joy listeners in suspense, but we're getting the signal from producer Tim that we're going to send it back to Keith for some announcements. And then you can pick up where you left off, Adam, about these folks that are really drawn to these extraordinary things working for God. So for now, let's hold it there. We'll send it back to Keith.
All righty. Thank you so much, Debbie and Adam. And I think about my own life when it comes to devotions and just, I used to pick all of the devotions because I wanted them all. I wanted to pray them all. And then I realized that's not realistic. And thank goodness my spiritual director kind of metaphorically slapped me in the face and said, just stick right now for you, the rosary, work on that, get that basic habit down. And then if you want, then devotions. And that in itself helped, kind of like what Adam said, just getting back to some of the foundations, the basics, and then moving from there. But do you have a particular topic that you'd like Debbie and Adam to discuss on The Next Right Thing? If you're live streaming right now on any of our social media platforms and you have a thought, go ahead and throw a suggestion in the live chat. Otherwise, you can always email us at morningjoy@grn.com. But yes, coming up next, we are continuing this conversation on finding balance in our spiritual lives, especially those who pick some extraordinary thing. We'll talk about that coming up after this break on Morning Joy, where truth matters.
You're listening to Morning Joy, where truth matters.
Hello, this is Steve Gleason, your live host with The Quest Show. It's our show that helps get us on that pilgrimage to move toward heaven. Love to have you join me each and every Wednesday live, 5 o'clock Eastern, 4 o'clock Central. I'll look for you to be there each and every week. A show designed to help get us in that passageway to the city of God, to God's holy presence, to heaven. Don't miss this pilgrimage of faith. Join us 5 o'clock Eastern, 4 o'clock Central. Look forward to having you.
Guadalupe Radio Network wants you to know
the gospel reports that at two solemn moments, the baptism and the transfiguration of Christ, the voice of the Father designates Jesus his beloved Son. Jesus calls himself the only Son of God, and by this title affirms his eternal pre-existence. In the centurion's exclamation before the crucified Christ, "Truly this man was the Son of God," that Christian confession is already heard. After his resurrection, Jesus' divine sonship becomes manifest in the power of his glorified humanity. He was designated Son of God in power according to the Spirit of holiness by his resurrection from the dead. The apostles can confess, "We have beheld his glory, glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth." Paragraphs 444 and 445 in the Catechism.
Read and learn more today in the Catechism of the Catholic Church.
Welcome back to Morning Joy, where truth matters. I'm your host, Keith Downey, and we're continuing this conversation with Debbie Giorgianni and Adam Blai on finding the balance in our spiritual lives. And picking up where Adam left off, take it away.
Well, thank you so much, Keith. Yes, this is the final segment for this week of The Next Right Thing for Morning Joy. And don't forget to tune in tomorrow for the Spirit World, 10 a.m. Central, 11 a.m. Eastern. And the YouTube and Facebook chats, they get started right away. So if you want to join those chats, it's a lot of fun. But Adam, why don't you pick up where you left off? Sorry, I had to stop it right there. But Keith is right on cue. He wants to give us our announcements for Morning Joy. So why don't you share about folks that really, and they have a good heart and a good intention, and they mean well by wanting to do these extraordinary things for God, but sometimes it's just not practical.
Exactly. So there's two things that I always advise people when this has come up is, number one, go to your pastor at your parish and ask for an appointment. Don't talk to him after Mass in the vestibule. Go make an appointment, sit down, discuss your idea, what you feel might be a calling or a movement from God. Discuss that with your priest, with your pastor, because they have a lot of experience in the spiritual life. They've met a lot of people, they've heard a lot of stories, and they know a lot of the church's advice on these matters. Basically, what I'm saying is it's really valuable to submit things like this to your spiritual authority, which is the pastor of the parish that you live in primarily. So that would be number one. Number two is, if it's truly a calling from God to pick up some extraordinary new vocation in life, God's providence is going to help open those doors. So instead of saying, I've got to force this, I'm going to bang on the bishop's door until he lets me in, and he's going to let me start this religious order because, darn it, I'm sure of it. I saw Mary, she came and said this, and he's going to listen. I'm going to force it. If it's from God, God is going to work with you, and he's going to place the relationships and the circumstances to bring about what he wishes. So we want to give it some time, is what I'm saying. It's okay to be strong. It's okay to be, fervent about something once you really feel convicted and confirmed that it's legitimate. You know, Mother Angelica was very firm about starting EWTN and building it up. But she also, I know, prayed about it. She got guidance about it. She, talked with her superiors about it. So give it some time. Let God open those doors. In my own life, Deb, I didn't want to do what I'm doing. I never sought it out because there was no pathway to get there. It didn't really exist. But looking back on it, I see how God, through each connection, each relationship, each door that he opened, that was a door I didn't know existed, but he opened it, and it was my choice whether to step through them or not. And so I see his plan when it comes to these extraordinary kind of journeys that he might call us on.
Well, I completely agree. I mean, I never thought in my wildest dreams that I would start off in religious education teaching junior high students. Never. I mean, that was just it wasn't on my bucket list. It wasn't on thing I wanted to do. It wasn't at all. And I never even thought about going for a graduate degree in theology. Never did I think about it, but it was like the puzzle pieces were there. The people kept coming into view. The situations kept happening. The scenarios were just perfect. The timing was just right. It was like, oh my goodness, Lord, you are just like leading me in this direction. So, and that's that. And I think when that happens that way, it becomes something that God has basically, I believe, asked if you're willing to do it. And if you're willing to do it, he's going to pave the way. When we seek out for something else, it can be forced. And when it's forced, you can go into it and then go, oh my goodness, why did I choose this? This is not what I thought it was going to be. That's always dangerous. That's why we tell people all the time, like you said, talk to your pastor, make an appointment, have a spiritual director, a proper discernment and a long discernment.
Yeah, and I call it reciprocal discernment. So if I feel God's calling me to do something, I go to, in my case, because I work at our diocese, I go to my superior and I say, I think I'm supposed to be doing this. What do you want? What's your impression? Can you pray about this? That's how I ended up in canon law. It just was out of the blue. And I went to the proper superior and said, I think maybe I'm supposed to be getting involved in this. What do you think? And boy, here we are. So I'm saying give it some time and look for God to be opening those doors. Okay, I know we have only a few minutes left, but the next one is the person that says, I'm supposed to take on this special spiritual job in life. I'm going to, for instance, they get inspired about the poor souls, and they say, I'm going to devote an extraordinary amount of my life and promoting it and praying for the poor souls, and I'm going to have visions of them and have these extraordinary experiences, and it's going to take up the bulk of their life. And it's an unusual spiritual ministry. It's a real ministry. We are supposed to pray for the poor souls, and we do. But some people want to take it to an extreme, Deb. And I also see people that, in the work I'm involved in exorcism, they say, I want to come and pray at the exorcisms and see all this stuff and get up in the demons' faces and, say these prayers. I feel called to be a spiritual warrior. And that might be true. But what do you think about taking on these kind of unusual spiritual jobs within the regular spiritual life? Like, it's not a vocation. They're not entering a formal religious order, but they want to do unusual things.
You have to kind of look at ask the person why they're driven to do that. What is the reason? Are they trying to make up for something? Are they trying to, it's interesting why people do the things they do for God. It's very interesting. And I think if you peel back the layers and you really find out that it has something to do with maybe their own feelings of they're insecure or, self-worth and all that kind of stuff. They may feel like they're a little out of sync with God. If you can reinforce in them and affirm in them the fact that they are a child of God, and if there was only one of them in the whole entire universe, Jesus would have suffered and died again just for them, and get them to realize they don't necessarily have to do these things that are going to take up all of their time in order to win God's favor.
Mm-hmm. And I know we only have about a minute and a half left,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
but the last one I wanted to touch on is so salient today, just in these last few years, and that is the balance between focusing on deliverance, exorcism, and curses, and all of that negative stuff, versus the positive basics of the Christian faith. I see a lot of imbalance because people are excited by the intense stuff. They're excited to see exorcists tell their stories in these interviews.
It's an adrenaline rush.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But what I see the problem with it is they put the demonic at the center of their spiritual life, and they spend their time worrying about whether they're under attack or they're being cursed or somebody's doing black magic against me, and I need to say these 12 prayers every day, or I'm going to, be destroyed, or I'm going to fall to some it's basically a defensive posture, mm-hmm. focusing on the enemy, versus a positive posture of trust and peace in Jesus, understanding that he's God, and not worrying about the enemy. You worry about him in the sense that you avoid mortal sin, but don't spend all your time in your spiritual life focusing on spiritual warfare. I think it's unhealthy.
Right. Adam, we probably should devote a whole entire hour on the spirit world about this idea of spiritual balance, because I think it's so important for our listeners to really understand this, because a little goes a long way with God, especially when you say all the time that it's done from our hearts. And that's important. And that'll give folks the confidence to keep going and to keep going deeper and deeper with God. So I just hope we put this on the show calendar. But Adam, I wish we had longer. We don't. So I'll see you, God willing, tomorrow for the spirit world. For now, we'll send it back to Keith for the rest of Morning Joy.
Wow. Thank you so much, Debbie and Adam. And it always goes by so quickly. But did you catch last weekend's episode of The Spirit World? A lot of great questions, about stress affecting spirituality. Are New Age practices dangerous? Short answer is yes. When do demons tell the truth in exorcisms? So many more great questions you all asked last Saturday on the Spirit World. So make sure to find it on YouTube. Just search GRN Online. And then put on your calendar for tomorrow, 10 a.m. Central. We're talking about fear. And you're not going to want to miss that. But coming up next, discovering your calling. What exactly is a vocation, and how can our work be our mission? Talking with Julie Carrick here on Notes of Truth right after this break.
You're listening to Morning Joy, where truth matters.